Hashtag part 1. Most people think $100,000 is where money finally starts changing your life. The strange part is what changes first: your decisions, your confidence, and the price you're willing to pay for control. You check your investment account on an ordinary morning. Maybe you started with $500. Maybe there were years when the balance moved so slowly you wondered whether you were wasting your time. You kept contributing anyway. Then one morning, the number crosses 6 figures. $100,000. You stare at it longer than expected. And for a moment, you wait for your life to feel different. It doesn't. The same apartment is around you. Your job still starts at the same time. Nothing outside that screen knows what just happened. But something has changed. Not your lifestyle. Your relationship with money. Because $100,000 isn't just a financial milestone. It is the point where the habits that built your savings begin changing the way you see everyday decisions. You become less reactive. Less eager to impress. Less afraid of small financial problems. And, surprisingly, less interested in proving that you can afford something. Think about the last time you spent money you didn't really want to spend simply because saying no felt uncomfortable. Maybe a coworker organized an expensive dinner. Maybe a friend suggested a weekend trip you couldn't justify. Maybe someone asked you to split the cost of something you barely cared about. Before $100,000, the decision can feel bigger than the money itself. You don't want to look cheap. You don't want to explain. You don't want anyone noticing that $75 matters to you. So you pay. Not because the purchase was worth $75. Because avoiding the conversation felt worth $75. After you build a serious financial cushion, something subtle happens. You start asking a different question. Not, can I afford this? But, do I actually want this? That is a different kind of freedom. You may still say yes. But now the choice is conscious. You aren't using money to purchase approval. And that distinction starts appearing everywhere. You stop treating every discount like an opportunity you must take. You stop feeling that every unexpected expense is an emergency. The reason isn't that $100,000 makes you rich. It's that it gives your brain some distance. A $300 repair can still be annoying. A $1,000 bill can still hurt. But it no longer automatically means, what am I going to sacrifice to survive this? There is now a buffer between the problem and the panic. And that buffer changes your behavior. You can pause. You can compare options without desperation. You can wait. You can say no. That last one may be the biggest change of all. Because when you spend years building wealth, you eventually realize how often you were paying for things that had nothing to do with the thing you were buying. You weren't paying $50 for dinner. You were paying to avoid feeling left out. You weren't accepting every financial obligation because it was smart. You were accepting it because you were afraid of what saying no might reveal. At $100,000, that fear begins losing its authority. And then the financial system starts revealing another side of itself. Your bank may suddenly invite you to speak with someone about your investments. Your brokerage may offer services you never saw before. People who once treated your account like a number may suddenly treat it like a relationship worth maintaining. It can feel like you've earned their respect. But that's not really what happened. The system didn't become kinder. You crossed a threshold. The same institution that once charged you for being short on cash now wants to talk about what you should do with your surplus. And the contrast feels surreal. You remember being younger and watching a $35 fee ruin your mood. You remember calculating whether an unexpected expense would force you to move money around. You remember checking your account before making ordinary purchases because every decision had consequences. Now, for the first time, you have room to think. You don't have to answer immediately. You don't have to accept the first offer. You can listen, compare, and walk away. That is what $100,000 begins to buy you. Not luxury. Not status. Leverage. And leverage changes the way you move through the world. You still have bills. You still have responsibilities. You still have bad months. But you are no longer standing on the same financial ground you were standing on before. And that is when the next transformation begins. You start realizing that the most valuable thing your $100,000 can buy isn't something you can put in a shopping cart. Hashtag part 2. The most valuable thing your $100,000 can buy isn't something you can put in a shopping cart. It's time. Not more hours in a day. You still get the same 24 hours everyone else gets. What changes is how much money you're willing to spend to protect those hours. Imagine you need to drive across town for something that costs $10 less at another store. A few years ago, you might have done it without thinking. 30 minutes there. 30 minutes back. Maybe another 10 minutes walking around comparing prices. You would call it being responsible with money. And technically, you saved $10. But once you've built enough financial breathing room, the calculation starts looking different. Was that hour actually worth $10? Maybe the answer is yes. But increasingly, it won't be. You start paying for convenience without feeling guilty about it. You choose the closer parking spot. You order the thing instead of spending your Saturday hunting for it. You take the faster flight when the difference is reasonable. Not because you've become careless. Because you finally realize that money is renewable. Time isn't. For years, you were trained to ask what something costs. Now you start asking what it costs you not to do it. That shift sounds small until it spreads into everything. You stop spending 20 minutes searching for a cheaper subscription you barely use. You stop driving across town for a slightly cheaper tank of gas. You stop turning every weekend into a project designed around maximizing savings. And suddenly, your life feels less crowded. Not because you have more free time. Because you're no longer selling pieces of your free time for tiny amounts of money. That's one of the hidden psychological benefits of building wealth. Money stops being the only resource you know how to protect. You start protecting your attention. Your energy. Your weekends. Your patience. And then you notice something more complicated. Your relationships begin changing too. Not necessarily because anyone treats you differently. Because you do. Picture a dinner with friends. The bill comes. Someone immediately starts calculating who ordered what. Another person is quietly checking their banking app. Someone suggests splitting everything evenly, and you can tell that one person at the table is hoping nobody notices how uncomfortable that makes them. A few years earlier, that might have been you. You would have felt every dollar. Now you don't. You pay your share and move on. At first, that feels like freedom. Then you notice the distance. You still love these people. You still want to see them. You still laugh at the same stories. But you're no longer living inside the same financial reality. And that can be surprisingly lonely. Because financial progress creates a strange problem nobody warns you about. The people who knew you when you were struggling may still understand your personality perfectly. But they may not understand your decisions anymore. You start thinking about investing while they're thinking about upgrading their lifestyle. You start protecting your savings while they're trying to justify a new payment. You start asking whether a purchase will improve your life while they ask whether the monthly payment fits. Neither side is necessarily wrong. You're simply solving different problems. And sometimes that difference makes ordinary conversations feel strangely unfamiliar. You might find yourself hiding parts of your financial life because you don't want your progress to change the friendship. You don't want to become the person who gives unsolicited advice. You don't want people assuming you can pay for everything. You don't want someone else's financial struggle to become a comparison between the two of you. So you stay quiet. And that quiet can be healthy. Because building wealth isn't supposed to make you feel superior. It's supposed to make you less financially fragile. Those are very different things. Then comes another change, and this one is almost impossible to notice while it's happening. Your definition of a big expense begins moving. The purchase that once required 3 weeks of mental preparation becomes something you can evaluate in an afternoon. Not because you suddenly stopped caring about money. Because your savings changed the consequences of being wrong. If you make a bad purchase, you recover. If your car breaks down, you don't immediately reach for a credit card. If your job disappears unexpectedly, you have options. And options are what financial security actually feels like. You can leave a toxic job without knowing exactly what comes next. You can take a few months to find something better. You can help a family member without putting your own finances at risk. You can say, "No, that doesn't work for me," without calculating whether the consequences will destroy your month. That is the point where wealth stops being about things. It becomes about control. But there is a catch. Once you realize what financial breathing room feels like, you start wanting more of it. $100,000 was supposed to be the destination. Instead, it becomes the new starting line. And that's when the number begins doing something you probably didn't expect. ## Part 3. $100,000 was supposed to be the destination. Instead, it becomes the new starting line. Because once you've spent years believing that 6 figures will finally make you feel secure, something unexpected happens after you get there. You stop looking at $100,000 as a mountain. You start looking at it as a foundation. A few months later, you open your investment account again. The number is no longer $100,000. Maybe it's $117,000. And strangely, the extra $17,000 doesn't feel as exciting as the first $17,000 ever did. You don't celebrate the way you imagined you would. You start doing something else. You run the math. What would $200,000 look like? How long would it take? What happens if your contributions increase? What if the market performs well? What if you keep going for another 10 years? The questions keep coming. And this is where $100,000 reveals its most dangerous psychological effect. It can make the next number feel possible. Before 6 figures, $500,000 can sound ridiculous. After 6 figures, it sounds like a plan. $1 million used to belong to some distant category of people you assumed lived differently from you. Now you can open a spreadsheet and calculate it. You can see the years. You can see the contributions. You can see the compounding. The impossible becomes measurable. And once something becomes measurable, your brain starts treating it differently. You don't necessarily become satisfied. You become hungry. But this hunger is different from the desperation you had before. Before $100,000, you were trying to escape financial instability. After $100,000, you're trying to build something larger than stability. That's an important distinction. You stop thinking only about surviving the next emergency. You start thinking about what your money could eventually allow you to do. Maybe you want the option to work less. Maybe you want to retire earlier. Maybe you want to help your parents. Maybe you want to start a business without being terrified of a bad first year. Maybe you simply want to know that if your employer called tomorrow and said your position no longer existed, your life wouldn't collapse. The goal becomes bigger than a bank balance. It becomes optionality. And that is when you begin to understand something most people miss about wealth. The number isn't valuable because of what it can buy. It's valuable because of what it allows you to refuse. You can refuse the job that destroys you. You can refuse the purchase that exists only to impress people. You can refuse the lifestyle inflation that turns every raise into another monthly obligation. You can refuse to make decisions from panic. And eventually, you realize that this was the real reward all along. Not looking rich. Not having a number you can brag about. Having the ability to make decisions without fear sitting in the room with you. But there's an even deeper realization waiting underneath all of this. The $100,000 didn't create your discipline. Your discipline created the $100,000. The money didn't teach you patience. You had to become patient before the money could compound. The account didn't make you consistent. You were consistent when the account was small enough that nobody else would have noticed if you stopped. And the money didn't make you confident. You built confidence every time you kept a promise to yourself. Every automatic contribution. Every unnecessary purchase you skipped. Every market drop you survived without abandoning the plan. Every month you kept going when the progress looked embarrassingly slow. Those moments were doing something the account balance couldn't show you. They were changing the person making the decisions. That's why the next $100,000 often feels different. The first one required you to become someone capable of building wealth. The second one is being built by that person. You already know how to save. You already know how to wait. You already know that a bad month doesn't mean the plan is broken. You already understand that consistency is more powerful than excitement. The number may be larger. But you are no longer the person who started. And that's the part nobody tells you when you're staring at your first few $1,000s. You're not simply trying to reach a financial milestone. You're practicing becoming the person who can handle it. Somewhere right now, someone is looking at an account balance that feels painfully small. Maybe it's $2,000. Maybe it's $8,000. Maybe they're sitting at a kitchen table late at night wondering how they're ever supposed to reach 6 figures when every month seems to bring another expense. They look at someone else's $100,000 and see distance. They don't see the years behind it. They don't see the boring transfers. The missed impulses. The patience. The mistakes. The months when nothing seemed to happen. They only see the number. And that's the mistake. Because $100,000 is not proof that someone's life was easy. It's proof that they kept making a series of decisions long enough for those decisions to become visible. So if you're nowhere near $100,000 right now, don't make the number your identity. Make the next decision your identity. Save the next $100. Invest the next paycheck. Avoid the purchase you already know you don't need. Do it again. Then again. Because one day, the number that currently looks impossibly far away will become a number you barely remember being afraid of. And when you finally get there, you may discover something surprising. The biggest change won't be in your bank account. It will be in the person looking at it. You thought you were spending 10 years trying to build $100,000. You were actually spending 10 years building someone who could build the next $100,000. And that is why the first 6 figures matter so much. Not because $100,000 is enough. Because becoming the person who can reach it means the next chapter no longer begins from zero. The money is the evidence. You are the achievement.